Okay. Hello, darlings. As you may have noticed, I am less lit than usual. That's because my light here just suddenly quit on me for no good reason that I can ascertain because I had charged it before the last broadcast. Anyway, it doesn't matter hugely because any of you out there with your masochism card can still see me well enough to know it's really me. Um, and I can still read. I assume the microphone is working okay. So I'll see if there's something that will explain what happened to this and maybe try the light again. But in the interim, I will just carry on. You may or may not know that I did radio for, God, a long time 10, 11, 12 years, both professionally and at KFJC, the Foothill College station, which was a great deal more significant than it sounds because we were one of the first radio stations in America to go entirely with a new wave and punk playlist, as it were. So as a result, one of the great things about being there, and especially when I was briefly music director for some time, was that we got all the records. Because none of the other kind of middle of the road FM stations or whatnot were playing Wire or the Cramps or whatever. That all the stuff that was coming out that was new. Obviously the obvious stuff, Sex Pistols, Clash, etc. So as a result, everybody just sent the records to us. And so we had a splendid collection. I'm sure they still do. I haven't been in the KFJC record library for years and years and years. Not since, as I said, I was the musical director there for a brief period. Not because I did anything wrong, but I didn't particularly want the job all that much. I was already kind of starting to write, I think, and other things were going on in my life. But anyway, so I don't know how I started on this, but anyway, oh yeah, just so I did radio for years and mostly talk shows. And one of the things that I learned is you just have to be prepared for anything and then just kind of go sailing ahead, like one of those big ice breaking ships. When there's ice in front of you, there's nothing else you can do because the ice is forming behind you as well. So you just crash through. And that's also the same with technical problems. And if the technical problems are not bad enough to actually knock you off the air, you just go forward. And so that's what I'm doing. In fact, it's kind of a little bit like, it feels a little bit like, one of those campfire ghost story things. Like I should be holding a flashlight in front of my face and saying, many years ago, on this same spot, a bunch of campers were having a cookout, and proceed to tell you about some horrible thing that happened to them all. And in fact, that reminds me a little bit of some of the stuff I was thinking about today, because for a long time, I couldn't actually figure out why writing seemed like such an obvious fit for me once I started doing it, because it was one of the last of the many kind of creative things that I tried. Although, I mean, I'd done it off and on. I wrote a lot in school, and my best friend and I used to write satires and parodies of things and amuse or horrify our friends with them. But one of the things I realized later on is that it was kind of a natural for me because essentially what I am and what I like doing is I'm a storyteller. I like stories. I think stories are actually crucially important to understand human history because, in fact, stories are how we put things together in our mind. It's one of the reasons that we have the concept of a beginning, a middle, and an end, because that's what storytelling is. Storytelling is about putting things into a form that makes some kind of a sense, even if you are leaving out lots of other important things, like the fact that after happily ever after, everybody eventually dies, and not everybody is happy after happily ever after. But it's still the way that we human beings process the universe. And since we still don't know exactly what the role of intelligence, and I'm not here limiting this to human intelligence because it is not a sharp drop off in terms of what intelligence means, I don't think personally. I think that many animals are what we would call, quote unquote, intelligent. They do not have some of the things that we lucked out with along the way in terms of mutations. So they didn't develop really complex verbal languages. They did not come up with ways to store those languages by writing. And these are all, of course, the things that help to make us the sort of technologically supreme species. I wouldn't say morally or ethically or any other way that we are the supreme species, but we certainly, in terms of technology and our ability to spread ourselves over the entire planet, we certainly have won that particular game. But so storytelling is super important, and it started long before. We will never know who told the first stories, whether it was somebody answering a question, looking up at the sky and a thunderstorm and someone says, why? And someone else tried to answer that. Or whether it was, a parent trying to reassure their child about something by making it into a story that explained why everything was really the way it was supposed to be, or even fantastical about, how no matter what happened, there would always be this thing in the future that would be better, whether it was heaven or Valhalla or whatever. But we definitely know that stories had to predate writing. And the earliest stories we have, like, say, the tale of Gilgamesh, the story of Gilgamesh, those only go back 5,000 years. But we have seen things like, for instance, all the new discoveries at places like Göbekli Tepe and Kakamik Tepe, I can't remember the name of the new one that they just found, and Karahan Tepe, and all these places in Anatolia that were obviously sites of people getting together in some kind of a consistent way to the point where they built huge stone structures, even apparently before farming. So that's one of the interesting things about that part of the world. It has kind of knocked a hole in the idea that farming came first, then monumental building. But anyway, I digress. So obviously stories go back much further than anything to do with writing itself. So we'll never know. We'll never know. But as far as I am personally concerned, it's one of the most important things that human beings do, because what do we know for certain? All we know is that, as far as we can tell, we are the only things like us. There may be others out there. There may be intelligences that we don't fully understand on our own planet. But to this point, and some more religious folk might suggest forever, but I say to this point, we're the only intelligence of that sort that we know about. So how we phrase our understandings of the universe and how we describe ourselves and our history and all those things, that's storytelling. History is storytelling because it is by no means science. And as many people have often pointed out, including me in my own works, history tends to be written by the winner of various struggles. So it is by its very nature always slanted. Every history of every country is probably largely propaganda, because it is always about people who are coming in to power and saying, how do we explain that this power all belongs to us? Many of you probably know that the tutors for whom William Shakespeare wrote had basically, in a complicated sense, usurped the throne from Richard III and the Yorkists in battle. And so one of the first things the Tudors wanted to do was to establish this idea of their claim to the throne being legitimate, and one of the ways to do that was to delegitimize the prior regime. And so you get things like Shakespeare's Richard III, in which Richard is an absolute villain. He was, of course, Richard of York. So the Tudors loved that. The Tudors just love that. And, without going into any politics, we can see that right now in the United States, where certain governmental officials are basically doing their best to stamp their view of history largely by removing things from museums and things like that because they don't like that history and they want a new history that doesn't cover those kinds of things. So storytelling has always been crucially important, and it is something that when I first realized that that's what I'd always been doing, whether I was writing songs, whether I was doing theater, when I was doing talk radio, or even just being a DJ, it was always about trying to tell stories, to make a point, to share things that I thought were interesting or cool with other people. Not unlike the role of, say a medieval bard or something, going from town to town and playing these songs that would then become number one on the local hit parade after the bard had moved on. So anyway, a lot of babble there just to say I'm a storyteller. That's what I do, and I am damn proud of it. So let me check in here and see if we've got... Also, I'm going to plug this back in for a few minutes. It may go off again. I have no idea. I still don't know why it should go off when I should have hours left on this charge from the last charge. But perhaps I messed up. No, I remember charging it after I did the last episode last week. Anyway, so we'll give it a try. It may only last for 5 minutes, but I'll check it on anyway, and we'll just see what happens. Okay, and last time it was going off within a few seconds, but who knows? We'll find out. Okay, let me quickly go and check and see who is here. Okay, there's a name I haven't seen for a while. Dale Schweninger. Hello, Dale. Good to see you, and a pleasure to have you here. Susan Shamblin. Hello, hello. Angie Paget popping in, to put it correctly. Mark Gamble. Hello. Good to have Mark. Good to have you here. I hope we do get a chance to see you soon. Let's see who else is checked in. Susan Shamblin. Oh, I already said hello to Susan. James Werfs. Hello, James. Good to have you. Cliff Winnig. Hello, Cliff. Barb Ann. Hello. Tracy. Nice to have you. Kristen Rule. A pleasure as always. Ray Weatherford. Hello, Ray. Good to have you. Ivan, my man. And Mark Craigbaum, my other man. I got two men. Medardo. Oh, there's a third. Good to see you, buddy. Emily Bell. Hello, Emily. Isaac is here, as always. Loyal, kind, brave Isaac. I appreciate you. Kelly Kenrick, same thing. Jim Laubacker, good to see you. Paul Rayside. Oh, that's a new name. Hello, Paul. Nice to have you with us. If this is your first visit, it's a pleasure. And Mark Marino. Mark is here. Hi, Mark. Good to see you, too. And it says one more, so I'm not sure who that would be, but I apologize if you fell off the bottom of the Facebook chart. But good to see all of you. As I said, we'll see the light may go out at any moment. Don't worry. It does not mean that we are under attack or anything like that. It just means there's something hinky with my now 6 or 7 year old lighting device, and I may have to get another one. But fortunately, there are other lights in the room, and nobody needs to see me that much. So without further ado, because I have nothing really to announce, as I said last week, I'm just working on the new book. I haven't started writing yet, but I am plotting extensively. The Splintered Sun is out of my hands for a while. I'll have one more pass through it at Copy Edit. Isaac Stewart is working on the maps, bless him. And yeah, that's about it. Dogs are good. Deb's good. Cats are good. They're hanging around somewhere behind me. And so I'm going to charge forward and start reading while I've got the light on, and then we'll see. It may go off in 5 minutes because that was about as long as I was able to charge it. But it said there should be more charge still left. Anyway, what can I say? Technology and we love each other, but it's a love-hate relationship, okay? I mean, I've always been fond of technology. I worked for Apple. That was what led me to writing the Otherland books. Because I was going to a bunch of conferences and learning about what was then called interactive multimedia, and was fascinated by it, but also realized, as a creator, because I was already a published writer at that point, even while I was still working my last year or two of normal jobs, I realized, I want this. I want this stuff. I want to be able to make worlds and play in them and invent things and have other people come in and experience them. But I realized at the time that it was like 20 years away, at least, and as it turned out, even longer, in some respects. And as a result, I went, I just can't do it right now. But I'm a writer. I can write about what it'll be like to have this nearly infinite access to various invented places. So that was one of the main things that spawned the other Land books. That and the Disneyland fantasy boat ride, but that's another story. Okay, so I am going to check in on the book. The last time we were in the Stanford Museum of the Arts, Bobby and his crew were struggling against Baldur von Reinmann and his neo-Nazis and the Nightmare Kids, the Nightmare, whatever they're called, Nightmare Children, which Bobby calls Swasti Kids, and the Bugbears, which are big, fat, jelly-like things that can still bite, and managed as Baldur von Reinmann was bringing up their third and most powerful, most frightening creature. Bobby managed to turn it around so that the creature ate Baldur instead. Then, just when they thought that they were, through the worst, and they went back down to the office they had found earlier, all of a sudden they got called. Bobby and Sam, who showed up in the middle of the fight, got called back up the stairs to find that Anaita had appeared. The angel goddess Anaita had appeared through her own mural, her own mosaic mural. And that's basically where we are. So I am going to continue with that section. So she's basically standing them. Oh, and she's got two giant glass lions as well that are part of the mural that also came to life when she inhabited the image of herself. So anyway, and then whatever Helena shouts that I can't remember, except it's got Ectobana in it. Helena shouted, "No, I don't know what it meant either. Not afraid of you. We will..." She didn't finish. Anaita waved a hand without even looking, as if dismissing a bad joke, and both Amazons were flung backwards, skidding through the rubble, till they tumbled and silent against the far wall. I could only stare as Anaita glided toward me, bleeding light in all directions, hand held out as if to bestow a blessing. She was beautiful, inhuman, and so far out of my league that I had been an idiot ever thinking I might have a chance. Instead, the blue fairy was simply going to take back Pinocchio's misspent marionette life. "Kaz, I'm sorry," was all I had time to think. Her hand touched my forehead and I burned. A cascade of electrical fire from my skull down through my spine, all the way to the ground like a bolt of lightning. My muscles all pulled wire tight in an instant. I could feel them trying to tear loose from the tendons. It was as bad as anything that ever happened to me in Eligor's torture factory. I wriggled helplessly like a live fish tossed onto hot coals. But I didn't die. Anaita's hand was freezing cold and scalding hot at the same time, but not in a physical way. It was as if she'd reached directly into my soul and meant to yank it out by the roots. The pain was incredible, but as it blazed, something came to me, a semi-coherent thought that made its way up past the clamor of my shrieking nerves, my panicked, dying thoughts. Why is it taking so long? In some weird way, I could sense that pain wasn't the point of what was going on at all, merely a byproduct, because Anaita wasn't killing me. She was changing me. And this, for no reason I can explain, felt 1,000 times more frightening than simple suffering or even death. I didn't want to be made into some mindless, happy angel, just another placeholder in the divine plan, anybody's plan, let alone Anaita's. But I could feel it happening, feel things inside me shifting and becoming almost liquid, my thoughts finding new paths like dammed rivers forcing their way into fresh channels. I wanted it to stop. I wanted that more than anything I'd ever wanted anything, except maybe to have Kaz back again. I wanted it to stop, so I tried to stop it. I'm telling this now because I'm still trying to make sense of it, but in the moment, there was no sense. There was no time. What was happening had always been happening. I was lost in a swirling river of color and light and flashes of understanding, all as disconnected as leaves caught up by a powerful current, sloshed together, then pulled apart again with no sense or meaning. I could feel Anaita's hand where it burned coldly against my skin, but I could feel more of her than that, as though somehow she was also inside me, rearranging the things that made me what I am. Deloriel, Bobby, the me that rides inside and thinks these thoughts and gets the rest of me into trouble time and time again. And as I tried to fight back against Anaita's terrible, intrusive tampering, I experienced other things too. Things that were part of me, but not part of me. Visions more real than any of my other memories. Sacred pictures, nightmares, and echoes. Dust swirling, and sky and sun lancing down through it. Fallen rubble, more dust, something heavy, pressing me down, trying to stop my heart. A woman's face, not Anaita's, far more human, smeared in dust and dirt-caked blood, eyes half closed, and distantly, the cry of a child, the hopeless, hitching wail of a child who cannot be comforted. There's no way to explain this without making it even more confusing, but I felt as though I'd been in a dark room for years. Then, just for a second, someone had finally opened the curtains to let in the fierce, startling, all-revealing light of day. I knew I was feeling truth. It was something greater than power, greater than the glory of heaven itself, and I wanted more of it. It wasn't just bits of unremembered memory. I knew it was truth. But Anaita sensed my resistance and pushed back, and that access to bright reality, a reality I'd never felt before and would always hunger for afterward, suddenly vanished. With it went hope. For a bare moment, I'd thought I had the strength to defy her, to beat back the things she was doing to me, but I had been wrong again. Her anger was as ancient and cold as pack ice, and she handled my soul like it was an ugly, broken toy. My very essence was being squeezed into oblivion. Nothing subtle now, no rearranging, no changing, just the pressure of oblivion growing greater and greater as she crushed what I was, compacting what felt like the very molecules of my being until darkness began to bleed through everything. Light and sound and thought dying. I was gasping for air and getting none. Thoughts roaring with blood-red light, then fading into a black as silent as zero. I could not speak, but I knew enough to call her what she was. Liar, I thought. I know you now. But I didn't. I had already forgotten. All the bright truth that for an instant had seemed so clear had been sucked away into the vacuum of nothingness. Nothing. Then light and noise rushed back in on me, as though I had popped up from beneath an ocean of tar, back into the world. Alive. Anaita lifted her hand. Her face, beautiful and terrible with living light, was twisted into a grimace of something stronger than surprise. Sudden rage made her eyes blaze almost red. Something had changed. Something black was now throbbing in the middle of Anaita's chest, the swing of a metronome, a needle on eternity's dial, vibrating, slowing, an arrow. I turned my head, which seemed to take years. Helena stood some 20 feet away, covered in the powdered remains of a fortune's worth of antique statuary, tactical crossbow in hand. Everything was moving so slowly. Oksana limped up beside her, lugging one of the AR-16s. Those brave women, so brave. And the flames from the gun's muzzle unfolded like flowers. Bloom, bloom, bloom. I saw the bullets stitch their way along the wall as Anaita actually staggered back, again with aching, unhurried gravity like a building toppling. One step, her other hand came up, then another, and then she bumped against the wall beside the bare panel where her mosaic had been. The moment seemed to hang. The angel of moisture extended her arms toward the Amazons as slowly as paint dripping in the sun, and I couldn't do a thing. 10,000 shards of glass leaped away from her, flying across the intervening distance like a horizontal ice storm. They ripped into Halina, the closer of the two. Oksana dove to the side, but I saw glass tear into her as well, freeing tiny rills of blood that lifted and spread like more flowers blossoming. It seemed to take half a minute before Oksana hit the floor. Then, suddenly, everything was moving fast again. The glittering lions snarled and fell back beside their mistress, troubled for only a split instant in the real world. Released from the power of Anaita's hand, I had stumbled and almost fallen, but I caught at the wall and kept myself upright. For an instant I was confused because I had been in that spot along the wall, that same spot only moments earlier, as if time had looped around. But why did that seem so important? Why couldn't I remember? Anaita yanked the arrow from her chest, dislodging bits of glass and stone, and threw it away. Sam still lay sprawled on the floor, and both Amazons were down. In an instant, Anaita would send the lions to finish them off, then turn back to me. I had resisted to my utmost, but it hadn't been enough. And now she was angry. The thing I needed to remember came to me then. I took a staggering step along the wall, reached up to where I thought, hoped, prayed it would be, and opened the zipper I had closed only minutes earlier. As I dove to the floor, angry bugbears spilled out of their prison, exploding back into the real world in great stretching globs of purple-black, as if a dam had broken and released a river of animate goo. They flowed down onto the floor and over the nearest stone and glass lion in a second. They flowed over Anaita as well, and for a moment I hoped she too might vanish for good under a heaving blob, but instead I saw light and heat lance out through the pulsating waves of jelly. If there had only been one or two of the creatures, it would have been over right then, but all the bugbears were out of the zipper by now, furious at their imprisonment, and they followed the others in what looked like a feeding frenzy. The translucent glob that had swallowed the angel of moisture stretched and bellied out, and I could smell the hideous stench of burning bugbear. But they were old, strong things, and they weren't so easily beaten, even by someone as powerful as Anaita. But she would win, that I was sure. We had seconds at the most. I scrambled across the floor to Sam, dragged him to his feet, then staggered toward the Amazons. Oksana was on her hands and knees trying to get Halina up, but one look told me that it was too late. Halina was pin-cushioned with pointy shards of glass, many in her chest and throat, and had lost so much blood that it spread for several feet around her. "It's no use," I said, dragging at Oksana, but she fought me. "Halya!" she screamed, a heart-piercing sound. "Halya!" We had no time. I put my fingers to Halina's throat where the pulse should have been, but it was only for Oksana's benefit. "She's gone. I'm sorry, but we have to get out of here." I grabbed Oksana again, held her tight. "Come on!" She wasn't crying, but her face was lost. Just lost. "No, not go. Only with her." It was pointless. I could tell Halina was already dead, but I knew it would be impossible to get Oksana moving without bringing her friend's body. The burning smell was getting stronger. I scooped and levered up Halina's limp weight, then slung it over my shoulder. "Where?" Sam asked. He looked as bad as the women, bloodied and ghost-like with dust. "The door. Down in the office. The door to the third way." He shook his head. "She can follow us. She can follow us anywhere else just as fast, but that door will get us out of here quicker. Come on. Stumbling through the shambles of smashed exhibits, skidding on broken glass, we waded past the seething, burning, bruise-colored swamp that was Anaita, swarmed by bugbears. Something as bright as the flame of a welder's torch was burning inside the mass, and I could tell things were going to get ugly in this particular vicinity real soon. Halina's limp weight almost tipped me over going down the stairs, but I made it somehow. Sam was standing in front of the marble rectangle, the god glove on his hand. He said, as if to nobody, "You realize if she's locked it somehow, we're fucked." There was nothing to say to that. We were already fucked in so many ways. They could have dedicated an entire revision of the Kama Sutra just to us. As Sam gestured, the line down the middle of the marble rectangle glowed, but only for a moment. A seam of pure white radiance. Then it was gone, as was the wall and everything else, replaced by what I could only describe as a froth of bubbling light. Sam shoved Oksana through, then followed her. I took a deep breath, clutched Halina's body close to my chest, and leaped after them. Grass. That was the first thing I noticed as I fell forward. Grass beneath my feet. And I tumbled, and it was against my chest, my head, all of me, even up my nose in spiky, tickling profusion. When I stopped rolling, I dragged myself to my knees. I seemed to have lost Halina's body on the way through, but in the first moments, that absence barely registered because of what was all around me. One of the strange things about being me is the way beautiful and horrible keep squishing into each other. Only seconds beyond what had seemed like certain destruction, we had landed in paradise. We were in a forest glade, but what was around us was as far beyond the usual state park picnic area as heaven was beyond Hoboken. The vegetation was so vividly green it seemed to have been freshly painted. There was never a sky so blue, so triumphantly sky-like, and even the gray mountains I glimpsed through the trees seemed to have been constructed specifically to give people a reason to use the word majestic. Some extremely eccentric gardener might have watered everything with pure psilocybin just to grow these beautiful, heartbreakingly realistic hallucinations. But they weren't hallucinations. This was real. I would have happily stood there for hours, drinking it all in. But I had just realized there were only two of us in this magic place, only Sam and me. "This way," my buddy said. "Hurry. We got to get the rest of the third way people moving, get them hidden. Who knows what she's going to do now we got her really mad." Even in the middle of all this perfection, I was suddenly empty and hopeless. "They're gone. The Amazons, Sam, they didn't come through." He stared at me, then slowly turned and looked all around. "Shit. They're not angels. Of course they couldn't pass through to Kainos. But other souls came here, all your volunteers, souls, not bodies." "But Halina, she was dead, Sam." "Then her soul's somewhere else, being judged." He started through the trees. "It's shitty luck, but now we have to save the ones we can. The rest of the souls here." "No, Sam, I can't just leave them." He spun and came back to me. "One of them is dead, Bobby. You just said so." He wasn't angry, just confused and hurting. "That doesn't matter. You don't leave a soldier behind if you can help it. You know that. Can you open that passage again?" Now he was angry. "You want to go back to that museum? To Anaida? Just open the doorway or whatever it is. Oksana and Halina have to be somewhere. Maybe I won't have to go all the way back. Maybe they're in between somehow. I don't even know what that means, but I have to find them." He only thought about it for a second. "I can't come with you, Bobby. I owe it to the Kainos people to stay and help them." "I know. Just do it. I can't just open it or it'll dump you right back into the museum. So I'll try to open the far end somewhere else. But I gotta warn you, I've never tried anything like that. And after everything today, I don't know if I've got the strength. He lifted his hand, closed his eyes. A moment later, a shaky, vertical shimmer of light appeared beside me. I don't know how long I can hold it or exactly where it's going to take you. I'm hoping it doesn't just drop you in it. Don't say it. I'll find out in a minute anyway. I took a last quick sniff at the clean air of this brave, new, unfamiliar world. Why do I only get these fleeting glimpses of happiness, these moments, and they're ripped away again? Hang in, Sam. We're not beaten yet. But my buddy looked pretty damn beaten, and I had no doubt I did too. Remember our motto? Confusion to our enemies. Then I left paradise behind and climbed back into the light. Chapter 32. Sad and Beautiful Music. Actually, I still don't know why I didn't wind up back in Anaita's museum office, especially with Sam in the kind of condition he was in. Maybe there's more kindness to the universe than I ever guessed. Maybe instead of being one of the world's unluckiest angels, I've actually been a bit more fortunate than I realized sometime. Whatever the case, Sam's God-gloved doorway didn't drop me into the middle of the Anaita versus Jam Blob death match, for which I can only be grateful. Extremely grateful. Back in the way old days, when people believed, or wanted to believe, that planets revolved around the Earth, one of those old Greek guys proclaimed that the universe had built-in music, that the very existence of everything was underlined by cosmic sounds, and that even distances, like the Earth to the Moon, were measures of this music of the spheres, the musica universalis. Later on, that kind of fell apart, especially when Galileo was all, the Earth revolves around the sun instead of the other way around. And then the Vatican was all, we're about to go seriously Inquisition on your ass if you don't shut up. And Galileo was like, okay, you win. But under his breath, he was all, but it still totally revolves around the sun, dicks. Anyway, I'd give you this short history update to prepare you for what I heard when I stepped back into the door of light Sam opened, which was either the actual music of the spheres or an extremely convincing simulation. I was surrounded by, or maybe engulfed in, what seemed not just white light, but different kinds of white light. Not different colors, just different intensities. And as I tried to make sense of my surroundings, I heard something I'll never forget. Now, mind you, I'm a guy who's heard the singing of the celestial choirs in heaven and screams wafting up from the deepest pits of hell. I'm no rookie. But what I heard when I crossed back through, what surrounded me like the breathing of some immense creature the size of a galaxy, was unlike anything else I'd experienced. It was as different from any other sound I'd heard as day is different from night. It was deeper than the deepest rumble, but it had edges, harmonics, I guess a musician might say, that stretched beyond my ability to hear or even perceive, and yet somehow I could still feel them. I was in the heart of the greatest living thing that could ever be, as if I were only a cell in that body. No, as if I were a single electrical impulse in the endless nerves of the highest. God himself. The sound, the music, the vibration, whatever you call it, it was all around me and everywhere. I was nowhere at all, but I was also everywhere. And that was right where I needed to be. This all washed across me in far less subjective time than it takes to describe. Then my rational mind, no jokes, please, finally showed up, took my mental hand, and kindly led me back to current reality. It was literally a sobering experience. The beautiful chaos hardened into something less diffuse, and the different tones of light resolved into a three-dimensional structure of sorts. I stood in an endless white corridor of glowing motes, like billions of tiny bubbles, but each one different, each one shining with its own tiny white fire, some brighter than others, but none of them dark. Everything around me, the floor, the ceiling, the walls, was made of these shining white cells, like the packing material out of the box the cosmos had been shipped in. I sat up, and in doing so, I realized that I was wearing my Earth body, and until I made it move again, I had been lying in a crumpled heap. Also, close by me, somebody was crying. I turned, the white scintillations around me smearing into streaks, and saw Oksana, just as I had last seen her, her face buried in Halina's red hair. Halina was just as pale and lifeless as she had been when I carried her in my arms. Oksana? She jumped, or at least she tried to, but the cellular glow around us was nothing so simple as a floor. When she moved, she seemed to be swimming in something viscous, and a scatter of tiny lights drifted up around her like startled fish. Oh, what is... In the midst of so much sparkling brightness, Oksana's eyes were muddy holes. Don't understand. You are alive, Bobby? A tiny glint of hope crept into her stare, but when she looked down at Halina's body, the glint died. No, not her, just you. Tears filtered her eyes. What is this? What place? I'm not sure. I don't think either of us are supposed to be here, especially not you. But it's okay. I'm going to take you back. Her eyes got big. Back where? Not there, not where Halia... No. God, no, not to the museum. We're going back to the apartment. At least I hope that was what Sam had managed to arrange, but I wasn't going to share my concerns with her unless I had to. She had already suffered too much for my mistakes. I stood struggling with the strange surfaces, the oddly thick air. My feet sank into the cellular material of the tunnel, but the resistance was uneven. I couldn't even make any sense of what I was standing in, whether it was one big thing or a billion tiny things, but the white glow made everything feel relatively safe, if not exactly cheerful. No, Bobby, I don't want it. Oksana, clearly driven past what any sane person should have to endure, slumped back down beside her friend's body. I want to stay with my Halia. We can't. This place isn't meant for people. Not living people, anyway. Remembering what Sam had said, that only angels and souls could pass through, I wondered if we were in some kind of lining for the universe we knew, a placental barrier to keep things out that should stay out and keep in that which was appropriate. Certainly the living, vibrating vastness of it felt more like some kind of organism than any artificial construction. It took a while to convince Oksana. I was beginning to worry that Anaita herself might pass through this place on her way to Kainos, and when I told her that, Oksana finally got up onto her hands and knees, and then onto her feet, shaky as a newborn foal. Where we take her? She asked. It took me a moment to understand she was talking about her friend and lover, Halina. Nowhere, I said. I think we should leave her here. No, never. Halina's gone, Oksana. Believe me. This isn't her. This isn't the woman you love. It's just a body. The reason I came back but she didn't is because she died. Now her soul has gone somewhere else. If anyone knows that, I do. A sudden new worry struck me like cold water. What would happen when Halina's soul was taken to Judgement? Like everyone else, she must have a guardian angel. Now that she died, the authorities would know everything, including every crime of mine that Halina had witnessed. And wouldn't they find out about Anaita, too? She was the cause of Halina's death, after all. How could even Anaita interfere with such a basic function of the heavenly system? As had been the case far too often lately, I could only shake my head. Too many questions that even an angel couldn't answer. "Come with me, Oksana," I said. "After all we've been through, all my fuck-ups, I'm afraid you still have to trust me. This part of Halina will stay here, maybe forever. I think somehow this is the body of the universe itself, or at least as much as we can understand it. The most important part of her has moved on, Oksana, but her body will be safe here. It won't be any different than burying her in the earth, just cleaner." "No." Oksana would not look at me. "No, we don't go." I was close to carrying her out by force when she added, "Give me small time to say goodbye." She bent over Halina's body and arranged the limbs, placing the young woman's pale, freckled hands on her chest, drawing her legs straight. She brushed a coil of glorious red hair back from the bruised face, stroking Halina's skin and murmuring to her in Ukrainian. At last, she sat up. "I wish she had weapon. We bury Scythian with weapon." "God will know she was a warrior," I said. "I have no doubt about that." "She was. She shot the Persian bitch. She hurt her." "She did. And saved my life, I think. All of our lives." I kneeled down and touched the corpse's bruised, pale cheek. "Thank you, Halina. God loves you. May your journey be a good one, and may you find the reward you deserve." Oksana and I walked along the glimmering soap bubble corridor until the light closed behind us like a shining curtain, and we could no longer see Halina's body. Oksana seemed nearly catatonic, but even for me it was like pacing through a dream. I wish I could explain the place better, but I've never experienced anything quite like it. I don't know if I will ever see it again, feel the musical air and the all-blanketing light, which tells you nothing about the weird physicality of the place. But I know I'll remember it until I finally stop thinking. We had been walking a while when I noticed everything around us was getting darker, as if twilight had begun to creep through the not world. We seemed to be moving through a duller sort of light now, drab and colorless compared to what had surrounded us before. We continued on in silence through this dimming world, but it slowly became clear that the dimness was not uniform. Patches of lesser light were followed by even darker stretches, then back to the dull twilight. Gradually, these dim passages became alternating bands of dark and darker. Some time later, we moved from a corridor striped with black and near black into a few moments of total lightlessness. I felt Oksana's hand reach out and grasp mine, but I couldn't reassure her because I didn't know myself what was going on. Then, a few seconds later, with little sense of transition, we were no longer inside something, but outside, walking down a suburban street lined with trees and streetlights. I had my phone in my pocket again. That and the street signs told me that we were back in San Judas in the early morning hours of the day after we'd broken into the museum, still a couple of hours before dawn at least. After everything else that had happened, clever, heroic, exhausted Sam had somehow managed to land us in the eastern part of the city, only a half a mile from home. When we finally staggered into the apartment, and because I couldn't think of anything else to do for her, I made Oksana a cup of tea. A few minutes later, she fell asleep, sitting up on the couch, drink untouched. I took the teacup and dish off her lap, tilted her sideways, and covered her with a blanket. Then I went back out. It was a long walk to Stanford, but I needed to get the taxi back. Partway there, I caught a bus full of the living dead you always see on buses before the sun comes up. I must have looked right at home. I'd washed myself and doctored my cuts and abrasions as well as I could, but I hadn't taken time to change clothes. My pants looked like I'd just been fired from pit bull obedience school for incompetence, and I had a couple of weird, large purple-black splotches on my shirt that would have stumped just about any forensic chemist you could find. Also, I felt dead inside. Empty, like you can't even imagine. I got off the bus on the Camino Real and climbed over the campus wall. I moved slowly and extremely furtively through the extensive wooded areas until I was close enough to Elizabeth Attell Stanford Museum to get a good look. No lights. No cop cars. In fact, no sign of anything out of the ordinary. Which was good. Not that I was planning to go back in there, no fucking way, but if the crime had been discovered, the cops would have locked down all the main gates by now and be checking anyone trying to leave. The cab was still sitting in the auditorium parking lot, by sheer luck next to another couple of cars taking advantage of the lot on a weekend, which made mine less obvious. I drove back across the campus, neck hair standing up the whole way in anticipation of police lights in my rear view, but nothing happened, which probably meant the mess at the museum hadn't been discovered yet. The guard at the gate barely looked up, just thumbed the button to open the barrier, then I was through and back out onto the Camino Real. I stopped at a bakery to buy some stuff for breakfast, then ate half the pastries on the drive back to Kaz's place, as if the bodily hunger of an exhausting, adrenalized night of horror and pain had lagged a little behind me, but had just caught up. Oksana was still asleep on the couch. I'd bought a bag of almond pastries that I knew she liked, and I left them for her on the coffee table, then took a fast shower and tumbled into bed. Somewhere in the next few hours, the door to the bedroom opened. I came half awake, the adrenaline flooding back, but it was only Oksana. "I can come in." "Sure," I said. I held up the blanket and let her crawl in beside me. I was more than slightly aware that she was wearing only a tank top and underpants, but I was too tired to care. She pushed up against me, and the trembling that ran through her from top to bottom was enough to tell me what was going on. I put my arm around her and let her get as close as she needed. "I follow her," she said. "Halina." I thought for a moment she meant she was going to die too, but before I could say anything, she spoke again. "I follow her because I love her. I know her when we are girls in school. To me, she is the bravest there is, like a kite." "Kite?" I said softly. "No, not kite. Knight. Knight. The ones in armor who ride horses, yeah? Yes, knight. To me, she's the bravest, the most beauty. When windy, her hair is like flag. I want to marry her." For long moments, she couldn't talk. I held her while the sobbing washed through. When she calmed again, she said, "Halina, tell me I am too young for her, that she is the bad news, and that she likes boys too. I don't care. And when she goes to join the Scythians, I promise that I will do too." Oksana put her head on my chest as if she liked the sounds of her words better, reverberating up from inside me. "And I do. 2 years, then I leave from school and go. And I love it. All the fighting practice, I get strong, and Halina still is the most beautiful. So strong compared to me, and so smart. She knows all about the world and the politics." I had never heard Oksana speak so long and had never heard her use English for more than a few sentences at a time. I tried to ignore the physical nearness of a warm, healthy young woman and just become a pair of ears and a brain because that's what she needed, but it wasn't easy. I may be an angel, but I was lonely too, and my body is just mortal as hell. And then, after a while, my Halia, she loves me also. Still, she has other girls, but she loves me best, she tells me. That is best ever for me. She called me. She called me. Oksana's voice hitched again. She had to ride this one out like a bad storm, gripping my chest with her arm and pushing her head against me, an animal trying to burrow down into the safety of the earth. When it passed, she said in a tight, calm voice, she called me Holdolochnik. That is bird with long legs that walks in water. She says that is me, Holdolochnik. The storm took her once more, and this time it went on so long that I fell asleep, still holding her closely. Later, probably in the first hours after sunrise, I woke again. Oksana was still in the bed with me, but she was wrapped around me in a much different kind of way, her groin pressed against my leg, her breasts against my arm, and she was pushing me, nudging me, making soft, muffled noises. Her nipples tented her thin shirt as she pressed them against my skin. She dragged them across my upper arm and groaned, but so quietly it was like something happening in another room. Oksana was asleep. I'm sure she was, dreaming of her lost Halina. I tried to move away from her, but she made a whimpering noise and held on. I had been dreaming of Kaz and was already half hard, but the rhythmic pressure of Oksana pushing against me, the little sounds of need and pleasure, had given me a painfully full erection. I didn't know what to do, except I knew that I had to get out of that bed. Oksana didn't want me. She wanted something she couldn't have, and I didn't want her, or at least my heart didn't. And I certainly didn't want to take advantage of her, whatever my crude and ignorant physical plumbing might have thought was a good idea. I turned a bit more to the side to keep her out of contact with my throbbing self, and as I was preparing to clamber out of the warm bed and into a cold chair, for the good of everybody in the room and at least one person who wasn't, Oksana gave a strangled little gasp, then her thighs tightened on my leg so hard I thought she might break my femur. I mean, that woman had some muscles. She lay there breathing deeply for long moments, then said something I couldn't hear in a voice completely muddled by sleep, before falling back into even deeper unconsciousness. I just lay there for a long time, trying to get back to sleep and not having much luck. I was missing Kaz in every way a man can miss his beloved, plus a few new ways I hadn't even thought about before. Eventually, all my blood flowed back to where it was supposed to be, dispersing to various useful tasks, and I could slide into darkness again, this time to dream of endless white corridors with no way out. And that is the end of chapter 32. So chapter 33, Rabbit Hole, will have to wait until next week. But I have bookmarked it so that we will remember, and I am still in the dark. Watch. I'm going to turn this on for a second. Oh, now watch. It'll go off in like 5 seconds. Don't ask me why. Anyway, so I'm wrapping it up before, even though this thing will go off before I finally finish wrapping it up. So want to thank you, as always, for spending time with me. It is hugely appreciated. I hope you will take good care of yourselves. That's always the first step. There goes the light. Take good care of yourselves. That's the first step. And then also, please take good care of your friends and loved ones and keep an eye out for others around you who might need a little help or encouragement, just a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, a couple of bucks for someone down on their luck, whatever it might be. You'll know it when you see it. Anyway, so until that point next week when I return at the same TAD time, same TAD channel, again, I thank you for joining me. I will see you soon. Peace. Be well. Ciao, bambini. Ciao.